Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Just before we go live here with the interview, I will explain how it will work today. I do have a scripted portion of the interview, scripted questions, which I will read out live and go through those questions with our guest. After that, I will invite viewer questions if you have any. So without further ado, hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, respective of where you are in the world. My name is Mark Allard-Will, and I'll be your host for this interview today. But as you can see, I am not alone. I have the privilege of being joined from right here in Saskatoon by comic book creator Audra Balion. But don't worry, we are respecting the quarantine rules, and we're doing this interview live via Skype. Audra, can I ask you to introduce both yourself and your work to the viewers, please?
Sure. I'm Audra Balion. I'm born and raised here in Saskatoon, and I got my BFA in studio art from the university here in Saskatoon. There I studied art and drama, so that sort of pairing really influences my work in both departments, where I like to work in a whole bunch of different mediums and combine different ones. And then as far as sort of content, I like fantasy, sci-fi, surrealism, mythology, steampunk, all that sort of stuff.
Fantastic. And so now you're very unique in the comic book world for a couple of reasons. And the main one of them is that your long-running series is Flight 19. Flight 19 is a visually stunning comic book series set in a fantasy world. But what really separates it from the pack is that it's a silent comic, which is to say that it features no dialogue and uses only visual action to progress the story. What is it that inspired you to pursue this approach to storytelling?
Well, it's for beginners based on my work in general. It tends to be very narrative. You know, drawing a picture or doing a painting can take some time, and I find that as I'm making the artwork, I tend to sort of make up stories that go along with it as I'm making it. And I really like having that sort of mysterious narrative so that people can look at the picture and sort of start thinking about what's going on and what the story might be. And having a background in theater as well has really influenced the sort of storytelling aspect, where I've written and directed a bunch of shows. One of them was even silent as well, where it was all done through gesture, music, and puppetry. So yeah, it's really about storytelling in different means.
Fantastic, thank you, Audra. But your artwork is visually striking. You're able to mix modern traditional mediums with more of a fine art element. And this is very unique in comic books because, we're very used to seeing the traditional heavy inked outlines and not much of a fine art element. In your opinion, why is it important that artists push the envelope in comic art creation?
Well, I've got a few reasons for that. First off, when I was starting this project, it started from a fine art piece. I was in a printmaking class in the summer, and I just did this thing, and I started creating a story. And from that, I did more paintings, acrylic paintings, rather than comic book drawings. And those are what created the story to begin with. I was originally going to do the whole comic in acrylic paintings. I thought that was way too much work. So I figured I'd settle with the markers and watercolor sort of combination, but still treating it like painting more so. When I was back in school and doing a bit of comic book sort of style stuff, at the beginning it was sort of a bit belittled, comics in sort of that more academic setting weren't seen as much as an art form, which I definitely think they are. It's like a double art where you're combining the visual part and the written portion. And, both of those are art in their own rights, so why can't comic books be as well? As I was getting to the end of my degree, the people that I was with, they started to sort of accept it a little bit more, which was exciting because, there are, a lot of pop artists that are considered art. And I think that comic book art could at least fit into that, if not be its own sort of whole section of the art world. And then the sort of reason why I ended up, focusing more on the visual part of the comic books instead of the text. Well, adding text definitely would have been easier, and I almost switched to that a few times because it was quite a bit of a challenge to do just the visual medium. But I find that, when I'm watching people read comic books or whatever, they so often skip past the artwork. It's just sort of a background thing, and they're just reading. But in this form of doing a silence comic, the artwork is all you have, so you have to really look at it and spend time with the artwork and, read more slowly to take it in.
And I would say that you're very unique and very talented in the comic book field. And with that in mind, what one piece of advice would you give to anyone watching today who is looking to begin creating comic books for themselves?
I've got sort of two pieces that kind of go together, and they're almost in opposition. Well, one is practice all the time. Practice is very important because you want to increase your skill, and that's the only way you can do it. But that said, finished is better than perfect. You could spend so much time, like I've been working on this series for quite a few years already, and, wanting to, make sure it was good enough, or like the story was filled out enough. And so I spent so much time on prep work that it took me a few years to actually get to making the comic. And, I went to a comic book panel at one of the Comic-Cons, and that was one of the key pieces of advice that I got from those people, to actually just go ahead and do it, because if you don't do it, it's never going to get done.
Fantastic. Thank you, Audra. Now, we'll begin to open it up to viewer questions here, but while you were typing those, I will just take a moment to say that links to Audra's work are in the description of this live video, this interview that we're doing, and that will link you to Audra's website where you can find information on Flight 19 as well, the comic book series that Audra and I discussed here in the interview. So I'll just give it a minute to see if we have any questions come through. But otherwise, I will just say thank you, Audra, for this. I really do appreciate it. And I hope that you're keeping well with this quarantine that we're in.
Yeah, it's been great to chat with you too. It's a lot less social interaction. I actually just quit my day job, I guess, to become a full-time artist just before the whole quarantine thing. So it's been kind of weird, but it's been all right. Keeping busy working on the comic and everything has been good.
That's good to hear. And I'm looking forward to more issues of the comic, and I'm sure there are a lot of people that can say the same as well. And it doesn't look like we have any questions here, but if we do get any, I will just forward them on to you, Audra, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks. And for the next issue, I actually should be printing it at the end of this week. So, yay! Thanks so much, Mark.
You're welcome. See you soon.
Bye!
Like, share, subscribe.